Welcome, everybody, to the Skin Longevity Roundtable with VO's dermatology experts, Dr. Meenal Kettlepal and Dr. Victoria Yatsugnenko. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be here to join us as we talk about the largest organ of our body, which is our skin. We're going to go beyond the topical care and explore the internal and external factors that are influencing our skin health and appearance. Please leave a comment and drop a line where you are below. We'd love to know where you're coming in from. So before we begin, I have a couple of house cleaning items. First is a disclaimer. The information presented during today's webinar is intended for educational and informal purposes only, should not be considered medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. If you have specific health concerns or questions, please, we encourage you to consult your PCP or healthcare professional. During this session, feel free to submit your questions in the chat. We are going to do our best to answer them live here today. If for some reason we don't get to them live, we will personally contact you with those answers, I promise. Hey, let's see who's coming in. We have, Julie, welcome from Kentucky. So good to see you, Julie. You're on here. Van from Atlanta and Brenda from South Carolina. Welcome. We love to see everybody joining in from different parts of the United States. And finally, if for some reason you need to cut out early, or if you know somebody that wanted to be here that couldn't be here live, don't worry, this information will be circulated in the days to come. We will be sending out the replay link in your email and different areas. So don't worry about missing anything. My name is Grace Buffa. I am a board certified health and wellness coach and a VO health advisor and your host for today's webinar. I'm super honored and excited to be here with you today. If you are a VO member, you know that I act as your guide and advocate throughout your VO journey. If you are not familiar with who VO Health is, let me introduce us to you. VO Health is a revolutionary approach to healthcare. As you may or may not know, 90% of US healthcare spending goes towards treating chronic diseases, not preventing them. Most people are in a reactive mode. That means they're going to the doctors when they are having symptoms or when they're already feeling sick. We want to flip the script, as we say here at VO, in the way you approach your health. We are a proactive, preventative, physician-led virtual health and longevity platform. Our mission is to save lives and to make people happier by making them healthier. Our vision is a proactive well-care system focused on health optimization and prevention. We do believe that if you don't choose to make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And I'm sure a lot of you have already kind of had this on a smaller scale. If you've ever been sick with a really bad cold or a flu, all you can think about is being better. You can't do anything when you're sick. Health is wealth, and we just want you to enjoy and be proactive so you don't have to experience that. We focus on 6 areas here: metabolic health, sleep, nutritional, physical, brain, and skin. And we've dug deep to find experts in each of these areas. There is a methodology that we follow here at VO, starting with discovery. We ask our members to fill out an assessment form. This assessment form helps us to understand their medical background, their family history, medical background, their lifestyle, and the things that their goals and aspirations of what they want. Most one-time well visits, when they go to the lab in that physician doctor's visits, you get about 15 to 20 biomarkers. While optimal insights really require 100 plus for early detection of chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and autoimmune, just to name a few. If detected in early stages, this can prevent life-threatening situations. The CDC states that every 40 seconds, somebody is having a heart attack, and some of those heart attacks are deadly. That could be the first time somebody even realized that they had heart disease. So we want to get ahead of that. We also do body scans, like DEXA scans and other body images that you can ask upon request. We also offer wearable integration. So if you have a Oura Ring or an Apple Watch, you can integrate that into the dashboard. And this pulls very important data that's shared with our clinicians and health advisors to give us more insight on our members and their daily lives. Once all the data is collected, the physician goes over all the biomarkers, creates a personalized action plan for the member, and then they are able to, in a physician call, the member is able to go over all those biomarkers, all that action plan with their physician in a 60-minute call. The doctor explains all this in layman's terms because not all of us know medical terminology, so they understand exactly what's going on with their health and what needs to be done. Each member gets their own team. They get a physician, a nutritionist, and a health advisor. So they're able to contact them all throughout the year. They're able to have multiple visits throughout that year at VO here. There is an 85% increased chance that people reach their goals and lifestyle changes when they are held accountable, they are educated, and they understand what their intrinsic motivations are. Our other key elements that drive success here at VO is first our community of like-minded people. Like I said, we can get further faster together. On our community platform, you can discuss topics like members can discuss topics, ask questions, and they can learn from other members as well. You can also learn from our thought leaders. They are posting great articles and wonderful health and wellness tips on there. You get a great member experience with an intuitive technology platform. This shows your action plan. This shows your biomarkers, your nutrition plan. You can connect with community, your health advisor, and you can connect your wearables and much more here. We are also using AI to inform our members and our clinicians to help our clinicians stay on top of mind of thinking as well. That's how we also use AI. And this is all done in a compliant manner, of course. For more information, if this sounds like something you could use, you can go to vo.health and you can find out some more information on how you can become a member. For now, I am excited to introduce our dermatology experts. First, I'd love to introduce to you Dr. Meenal Ketterpal. She is a board-certified dermatologist and obesity medicine specialist with over a decade of clinical experience focused on optimizing skin health, metabolic wellness, and longevity. Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Victoria Yatsunenko. She is an expert dermatology consultant providing holistic care rooted in traditional dermatology, lifestyle medicine, and functional health. Welcome, ladies. I'm excited to dig in here. Victoria, why don't you start us off with understanding root cause of skin issues?
Let's do it. I'm excited. Well, I've been practicing dermatology for 18 years, and it seems like the last 5, 7 years, skin has been on every platform, the most discussed organ, I think, on internet and social media. And it seems like every other day there's some kind of new product, new discovery. But if you look around, more and more people have some skin issues. We have more people with eczema, with psoriasis, or people with inflammatory conditions such as rosacea. So what's going on? Why, we should be having less problems, and it seems like we're having more. Well, skin is a very complicated organ, and skin health comes from the inside. You cannot just throw a bunch of creams on it and expect that your skin is going to be great. There are so many things that actually affect it. And your skin health starts from the beginning, actually from the day you're born. What a lot of people don't realize, even the way the baby was brought in the world will affect the skin health. If baby was born through C-section, that baby was not introduced to mother's microbiome, and as a result, the skin is not populated by good guys by bacteria and yeast that we're supposed to have on our skin. So that initial introduction to the world already can be compromised. Another thing, we know there's strong connection between gut microbiome and our skin. There are tons of studies done, and healthy gut. Usually, healthy gut comes from a pretty diverse microbiome. So when do we introduce food? In many cultures, we introduce different foods much early in life. And in America, it seems like, we're moving in opposite direction. And if you look at the data, we do have more skin sensitivities and allergies. So that's something, again, we can start early in life and introducing different food in a little bit, maybe early stages. And of course, as we go through life, we go through hormonal changes, and a lot of conditions can be affected by that. So hormonal imbalances, gut, that's still not everything that affects our skin. Every day we come in contact with a lot of allergens, irritants, things in the air. Every time you step outside of the house, there's over 100, actually close to 180 different irritants in the air that can affect your skin and come in contact with your skin. And I'm not even mentioning the stuff that we actually put on our skin, like lotions, and we use soaps and so forth. And stress, that's another big player, because stress, we know, increases cortisol level. Cortisol level leads to inflammation, and it's a cascade of reaction. So you cannot approach skin just from one direction. Let's put this cream on and we're going to fix it. This skin cell does come from inside out. That actually the changes happen on the cellular level, and then the skin probably would be your first organ that will show you that there's some kind of inflammation or something you need to pay better attention to.
Wow. Thank you, Victoria. There's just so much that we can dig into. So let's go for it.
Let's do it.
So how do you apply this understanding with the VO members, would you say?
Well, with VO health professionals, we treat human body as very intricate structure, right? And we don't just fix one system at a time. So we'll look at it as a whole, and we try to make you healthy from inside out. So a lot of DNA changes happen. Again, they happen inside of the cell. And if one organ is not functioning well, another one is probably not going to do great. If you don't have healthy gut, a very good chance that you're not going to have healthy skin, or you're not going to have healthy joints. So it's all interconnected. And doing the biomarkers and looking at the body as a whole, that's what we do in VO, that actually gives you better answers and definitely better results and long-lasting results. So we're not throwing a band-aid on a little cut and hoping that it's going to heal. We actually treating from inside out, and finding the cause of the problem and fixing it instead of just covering it up, making it better temporarily.
Exactly. I think that's what people are really looking for these days as well. They're just tired of the band-aids and they really want to
Yep.
understand what's going on, and let's fix it for sure.
Well, if you don't mind, can we just go back to another? There's a little anecdote case that I would like to talk about, this rosacea case. And it's just one out of, I don't know, hundreds of cases. But, rosacea is a very common condition. I mean, anybody who practices dermatology probably comes across 5-6 patients a day with rosacea, which is an inflammatory condition. And I had this years ago, I had this patient who walked into my office, and she, right from the get-go, she said, well, I tried every topical, I tried all the oral medicine, so it's not working. What can you do for me? If you don't have anything new, I'm not going to do it, again, the same things I've been doing. I said, all right, so you already, rosacea is inflammation, right? But when your skin, the barrier is broken, then you're more susceptible to pathogens. So, and as a result, people with rosacea a lot of times would have some bacteria or sometimes yeast associated with inflammation. And we treat it as such. So we give them antibiotics, and again, temporary fix. And they stop antibiotics, it comes back. So we started talking with this lady. I said, well, a lot of food we affected, like alcohol and spicy food, chocolate. And she went like, chocolate? She's like, what do you mean? I eat chocolate every day. I'm a manager of the chocolate shop. And I said, well, maybe that's the cause. How about if we'll try not to? And she's like, how come? Well, chocolate, it can be a vasodilator, and also chocolate a lot of time will have some additives and spices that actually can be irritating and create inflammation. Chocolate very often will be mixed with dairy, which is also has hormones in it and triggers histamines. So that leads to inflammation. But anyway, to make long story short, this lady came back weeks later, brought us a big, huge basket of chocolate and said, "This is for you guys. I've stopped eating chocolate. Look at my face." And she was the happiest person ever. So that was just one good indicator how just fixing something inside, you can fix the problem from outside. And my thinking was, it's not just her skin that was suffering, because I'm sure she had some issues and inflammation in her joints and overall body. So I thought it was a pretty cool case.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. She didn't even know, and it's right underneath her
She
nose.
didn't know. That's right.
She had no idea. Wow, thank you. Okay, Minal, what testing does VO do that could help understand skin issues?
It's a great question, and this is what we struggle with sometimes in sort of a private practice, quick visit model, as Victoria mentioned, having the time to really think through the disease pathophysiology and then having this type of lab data available in real time at your fingertips to really correlate with the clinical picture is really helpful, at least from a skin standpoint, and I imagine for other verticals at VO as well. So some of the things that we love to uncover, or at least rule out, for folks is, their inflammatory markers. What is their systemic inflammation looking like? What is their skin inflammation looking like? Stress markers that show that the body needs recovery. We've heard a lot about sleep health and things and stress in general but in the skin, you really see it. You take a test and then you break out into pimples. I think everybody could attest to that. So the cortisol has such a direct impact, but sometimes we don't know that we're truly stressed and how can we improve it. And then, of course, there's like dietary review, as we mentioned, a great case of, chocolate or dairy in chocolate triggering rosacea. The gut microbiome is a really important metric. So one thing that I always tell my patients more on the obesity side is, we know the gut microbiome plays a role, maybe not, we don't know if it's associated or it's a causal role, but like, for example, the Firmicutes species are definitely seen in obese patients far more, bacterial colonies than the Bacteroides species. So maybe trying to change that balance, because that may be changing the way you're breaking down your bile salts, that may be changing the way you're absorbing your nutrients, that may be, and all of that changes when people go through either GLP-1 treatment or they go through a gastric bypass surgery. So something is clearly, very directly correlated with gut microbiome and obesity. And, similarly, we're uncovering more and more data in the skin. And then, of course, allergy testing. So one of the most common things that people notice is they develop sensitivity or eczema. And then they're kind of wondering, is it external or is it something internal, something I'm eating that I can modify? And that helping people navigate through that question is something that we can definitely attempt here at VO and get them close to the answers they're looking for.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Oops. All right. Let's see. All right, what skin conditions are hormone related in menopause? There is a lot of women in VO that are in this stage of life, and we're just curious on what's going on sometimes with our skin when we're in this phase of life.
Yeah, a lot of attention recently. It's a great question. I myself am approaching, perimenopause period, and it's such an important time in lives of women who've been, taking care of their families, their kids, and then you wake up all of a sudden you feel very different. And then skin is a huge component of it. I believe, obviously, we see a lot of hormonal acne. Start to see the start or progression of fine lines and wrinkles. People complain to me a lot about sagging jowls. There's actually a bunch of, you turn up YouTube and those kind of videos show up, almost reminding you if you didn't notice it yourself. Definitely skin dryness, because, as every, decade or so of life, our oil glands are sort of atrophying. And the bright side is you don't get sort of the teenage acne, but more of the hormonal acne, but the skin gets drier. So there are things that we may need to change in our routine to maintain that skin homeostasis. We talk about, eczema sort of as a child, but actually a lot of people can develop eczema around this time or even older age, closer to 60 and 70, because there's something called this immune, the immune system starting to get senescent. So those kind of immune system changes are happening, causing more likelihood of becoming sensitive to things that you're perhaps not sensitive to. And then pigmentation, with especially with HRT. Now that we know so much more about hormone replacement therapy, and a lot of women are turning towards it to maintain their estrogen levels, we sometimes see, onset of melasma and things like that. So lots of things here, but lots of things that we can help with tremendously, actually.
Oh, that's hopeful. Thank you. Okay, Victoria, sugar and skin. What is glycation and how does it impact collagen structure and skin elasticity?
Oh, I love this question. All right, so what is glycation first? Well, glycation is just a chemical reaction, right, where molecule of sugar binds to the either protein or lipid to another molecule and kind of breaks the structure. So in skin, it targets collagen and it targets elastin. So collagen is the strong molecule, very well organized. It's like a scaffolding, right? And elastin is a little longer lasting protein, and that's what gives your skin, that allows your skin to snap back and makes it a little bit stretchier and better. So, what happens when you have this extra excess sugar binding to collagen? Well, it just changes the structure of the molecule. It doesn't replicate as well. And how does it show in your skin? Your skin becomes not as firm, a little bit saggy. The colors start changing, right? Small lines and wrinkles that turn into deeper wrinkles, and and the collagen doesn't repair itself very well. So, what would cause it? I mean, we can't just say sugar, right? Well, obviously, like too much of the sugar is not a good idea. So high sugar intake will increase glycation, and as a result, it will lead you to having a little bit older looking skin that doesn't repair itself very well. But it's not just high sugar intake, but also frequent glucose spikes. So even if you don't eat sugar often, I mean, if you don't take a lot of sugar, but frequently, like let's say you're snacking every 2 hours, that's not great for you as well. You are going to have excess of that glucose that will be damaging your proteins. Processed carbs is the big one for sure. Another one, so when we think about sugar, we don't always think of alcohol. So alcohol is damaging in many layers, but it also has sugar and has carbs that affects your skin. And another one is smoking. So it's not always diet. Smoking, so the smoke actually introduces glycotoxins that all have the same effect on your collagen and elastin as excessive sugar. And all of that would be accelerated by UV exposure. So it seems like a simple answer what to do. Less sugar, not as frequent, don't smoke, don't drink, right? So with glycation though, the different stages, right? How much damage is done and is it reversible or not? So the earliest stages of glycation actually are reversible. That's good news. So initially, and especially with collagen, but if we have the same bad habits and keep doing what we're doing, the structure of protein can be completely broken, and it creates this almost like irreversible bond with your collagen that you cannot reverse. So initially, all those bad habits, you can reverse the damage and you can make things better. But if we continue, the damage becomes irreversible. And glycated skin will look usually kind of dull and yellow, and it doesn't heal very well. So it's not just lines and wrinkles, it's just the healing process. So the bottom line is less sugar, less alcohol, no smoking.
Wow. Yeah, sugar is definitely destructive on so many levels.
True.
No doubt. All right. Thank you so much for explaining that. That learning so much. Mina, what skin issues do you see more in men than women?
I
Oops.
absolutely love this question. Men, certainly in the anti-aging space, tend to be less frequent flyers in our clinics. I'm sure Victoria would potentially agree, but I don't think they're less concerned. That's my personal thought. They are concerned about the changes in their skin and, what they can do about them. But there's a few things that they're pros of being male, and then some historical things like a lot of men have played sports earlier in their life and continue to play tennis, golf, and continued sun exposure. There is sort of a if they're part of their group or cohort that's tough and doesn't want to wear hats or sunscreens, that's sometimes leads similar behavior, although I see that dramatically changing. I see a lot of young men wearing golf shirts, tennis shirts, protecting themselves with hats or baseball caps, often leaving the ears out for sun exposure, but getting to the wider brim hats. A lot of men who hike, they're protecting their skin. So, but I do think the lifetime sun exposure for men, especially in jobs like construction, or just have to be outside for various reasons, tends to have a little bit more sun exposure there. The bright side is, male skin tends to be much thicker. So, we definitely see thicker dermis. So skin, I always say, like to revisit, it's a two-layer organ. And so the second layer, the dermis tends to be much thicker in men. So in theory, wrinkling and, sort of the wrinkles that bother us as women, especially when we're entering menopause and the dermis is thinning, may affect men a little less commonly. However, they struggle a little bit more with hair loss, sometimes earlier than women do, and certainly at a greater sort of scale. So, we have Norwood 1 through 7 stages of hair loss in men, but women don't generally go bald. So there's some, significant differences how men age and women age. And while women tend more to get into like Botox and fillers potentially earlier, men may feel a little more stigma around it, although I do see more men coming out to do that. But once they do something like Botox, it may not be better received. I guess there was this huge story about like Bradley Cooper having some face work done, and meanwhile you see George Clooney that aged beautifully. So it's like, how much are we receptive about men aging and taking care of their skin and face while they're aging also differs in society. So I think we have to look at them in a very personalized way, and we try to do that at BioHealth.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. Thanks for pointing out those differences and yeah, thank you so much. Oh, let's see. Okay. So next topics that we're talking about is skin longevity and cellular health. Meenal, why don't you kick us off on this questions of topic and just let us know what we're going to be talking about next.
This is the most exciting topic that most patients ask me about at some point or another, because aging affects everyone, even though everything else that we talked about, rosacea, acne might be a subset of population, aging affects everyone. Men, women, and everyone. It's top of mind for a lot of people because there's a lot of advances and funding going on in that space and a lot of new knowledge coming out every week. So in the skin, I kind of think of skin as an excellent model to study aging because skin is actually an accelerated model because of the ongoing ultraviolet exposure, whether we're trying as much our level best to protect ourselves, but there's definitely ultraviolet aging. And the way you can kind of tell the difference between sort of chronological aging just based on our genetics versus the sun exposure aging is looking at the skin of your face or arms versus the skin of your butt. So if there's a way to compare the two, and if you ideally want them to look as closely as similar as possible. If there's a difference between, what your face looks like and your butt looks like, there's clearly some ultraviolet damage there. But I do think that there's a lot we can do because there is such a massive external exposure that we can protect against. And now that, we talked a little bit about collagen damage through glycation and all the things that cut the half-life of collagen from 17 years down to shorter. For example, smoking definitively does that. Those things, I think those are preventative measures that we can use. So we can dive a little bit more into, the types of sunscreens. That's a very, very common question. Some of the supplements that we now know can definitely protect against the ultraviolet A version of the ultraviolet electromagnetic spectrum, because that tends to go deeper and tends to affect collagen and elastin at a greater level than ultraviolet B light, which is actually very helpful for vitamin D production. Because that's something that we always hear is like, well, what about my vitamin D if I'm always wearing sunscreen? So things like that. And then, of course, there are genetic things that we unfortunately can't change, like telomere length and things like that, but we can definitely test for it to give people baseline information about their telomeres and things.
Okay, great. Well, let's dive into it. Victoria, how reversible are the key drivers of skin aging? We don't think about this when we're young, right? But it happens at a very young age. And we're thinking about it as we get older, right? Going towards midlife. We're starting to see the skin, the sagging, the lines and whatnot. Now we're like, oh, what do we do? So if you can fill us in.
All right. So yes. Well, good news is some of it, a lot of it could be reversible. So could be reversed. So that's great news. Not all of it. Okay. So we have to be realistic. That's something I have to tell my patients quite a bit. So, we can reverse some of it, not all of it. So of course, the key drivers would be oxidative stress, glycation, telomere shortening. Oxidative stress, well, it happens when we have too many free radicals. And again, everybody heard the term. So what are free radicals? Well, they're just kind of like loose molecules, the very unstable molecules. They're looking for extra electron. And if they're trying to find it from the good, healthy molecule. And usually, I mean, they're just result of metabolism, and it's just byproduct. And we're supposed to have antioxidants, and, the kind of antioxidants, they'll counter uh, free radicals. They kind of work against each other. So if we have too many free radicals, that leads to damage, to DNA damage. So what are the major drivers? What are the major causes of oxidative stress? Well, one is what Minal mentioned is UV exposure, UVA, UVB, and blue light as well. So this other one is environmental pollutants. Would be stuff again that it's ozone. It would be stuff in the air that we get exposed to, cigarette smoking. When we smoke, what people don't realize, we get exposed to I don't, but you know what we mean. There are over 4,000 chemicals in the smoke that potentially can affect your skin. And also environmental toxins. We put in more and more stuff on our skin without realizing it. And it's not just the creams and soaps. Even now there are some studies done, actually the clothes that we're wearing, the dye in the clothes can get absorbed, those chemicals, they can get absorbed into a cell and then get into your bloodstream. And that can lead to skin sensitivity. We actually see it more in kids now because the kids' clothes a lot of times will have those bright colors, so it has a little bit more toxins, and kids will be more susceptible to that. So something to think about. And another cause of oxidative stress would be the lifestyle. Of course, we talked about diet, but also stress. So stress, psychological stress, increases our metabolic demand, right? And so cortisol comes to play, and cortisol creates this entire cascade of inflammation, right? So that sets up the entire reaction where everything else is going to be affected. And of course, skin will be the first one that you would notice. That we know if we didn't sleep enough, or if we had a stressful day, yes, we're going to either break out, or your face will look puffy. So cortisol plays a huge role. And how do you decrease oxidative stress, the results of oxidative stress? So antioxidants, so it's food with antioxidants or taking supplements, diet rich in vitamin C, E, selenium, like beta carotene. Of course, again, avoiding alcohol and smoking. And topical antioxidants help too, like vitamin C, vitamin E, CoQ10, and sun protection. So glycation, well, I'm not going to talk a lot about glycation since we talked about it, but there's one really great study where, so glycation caused by sugar, there was a study done. So if somebody will be on a very restrictive diet, glucose restrictive diet for 4 months, it already decreases the number of glycated collagen by 25%. So literally within 4 months, you can decrease the damage by 25%. I think it's a significant number, and I think it's very impressive. So again, good news, it can be better, it can get improved. And there are some with glycation, some of it we can help with the sugar control. And also if you add some retinoids like tretinoin, for example, something that helps to exfoliate your skin. You start getting rid of the damaged collagen and damaged skin, so that you increase turnover of your cells, and as a result, you're going to have a better, nicer skin. If you want to have a little bit more aggressive approach or to have better results, now we're talking about like CO2 laser and radio frequency treatment, microneedling. So there are other things that actually can trigger collagen production. Elastin is a little bit more difficult. It's a longer lasting protein, and it's really hard to reverse that damage, although there are some lasers that help with that. And the telomere, of course, telomeres, again, it's kind of like a popular topic, but what there are the like little cups right on your DNA, and what protects the telomere, what extends the life of it: exercise, stress management, sleep, and Mediterranean diet has showed that actually you can increase the life of your telomere, and you can decrease telomere shortening with Mediterranean diet. So omega-3, fatty acids, vitamin D, C, E. So, and again, if you think about it, we're talking about fixing your skin and helping your skin from inside out. We're talking about Mediterranean diet. So the short answer, yes, we can reverse a lot of it if we're doing what we're supposed to.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe a little bit less gluten in our life and maybe some stress management, a little
Easy. Yeah.
breathing.
That's the easy part, right? A little stress.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so interesting. Mino, what supplements or extracts do you recommend to support healthy skin as we age?
Thank you so much for this question. And thank you, Victoria, for kind of teeing it up, hopefully convincing everybody that we need to fight some antioxidants. There are definitely a whole antioxidant discussion that we go into, but one thing that I really wanted to mention was astaxanthin, because there's a lot of buzz about it as a supplement you can take, because there's a whole host of topical products, obviously, that we can talk about, but something that you can take orally. Astaxanthin actually had a randomized control trial in 2021, and that's sort of what created a lot of the buzz around it. That showed that it improved skin hydration and elasticity significantly. So randomized control studies is where you have someone taking the medication, somebody taking the placebo, a group of people taking, and then they followed over time. And this effect was noticed over a few weeks, right? So if there's a study that runs 6 to 12 weeks, that's something then you can take away from it, from the study. You could try to incorporate that in your supplement stack and see if you notice similar results. One thing it didn't improve was wrinkle depth and just overall wrinkled appearance. So we do think for hydration, as we talked about, especially women getting into the menopause, a 10-year window, I think astaxanthin can be helpful if you're noticing your skin's drying out. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later in the webinar. And then comes collagen, which is also something that's the most common thing that people ask me about, and I will make it really short. I actually do recommend people take some collagen, preferably from marine sources. And here's the reason why. We actually don't have really good data on collagen improving skin elasticity, wrinkle depth, all those things in studies that actually are not funded by the companies that are actually making collagen. There are studies that show, okay, this is our high quality collagen, and look, we did this study with control subjects, and it improved. But there was actually a very recent Korean meta-analysis, which means it looks at all these randomized control studies, and they showed this bias that the studies that weren't funded showed no benefit, and then the studies that were funded showed benefit. But I do think that there are certain nutrients in the marine sources of collagen that are very, very helpful. So, for example, there's a hair supplement called Viviscal, which I know is not mentioned here, but that's from like shark collagen, which has actually significantly been shown in randomized controlled trials to improve hair growth. So I think the marine sources are really, really valuable. So I think, and we don't really eat collagen, right? So collagen, I used to think collagen is this big protein, gets chopped up into amino acids. So how is it any different than taking in protein? But we now know that's actually not true. Collagen is broken down into dipeptides and tripeptides, so sequences of 2 or 3 amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. And those are independent signaling molecules. So one common tripeptide that people might have heard of is something called GHK, and it's added with copper. So it's called GHK copper, which we know does help with collagen remodeling and wound care and skin and maybe some hair growth and definitely in fibrotic lung diseases. So that's the reason I don't think there's any harm that we've seen from collagen, and we're not eating cartilage, when we're eating our meat. So I personally do recommend collagen, although I wish we had better data.
Thank you. I know like collagen is a big deal. People are curious whether they should take it or not. So thank you for that explanation and where to get it from. Victoria, NAD, how can this benefit the skin? First, if you want to explain what NAD is for those of us who are not familiar with that term, and how can it benefit the skin?
Well, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, right? So what's
Everybody can get close to
NAD?
that.
That's another buzzword out there. So, and it has been for the last few years, I think. So, in basic terms, what does it do? So, on the cellular level, it boosts energy production, right, in mitochondria. And also, it generates cellular repair. It's literally a fuel to drive the repair in the cell. And that's what it does also in the skin. So I think NAD, I think one of the first people who was talking a lot about it was David Sinclair. And now, of course, there are tons of supplements and, people take not just oral NAD, but also people do injections and IV, and some people even put some topical, but we'll talk about it. So what does it do when you start taking supplements of NAD? So it helps to renew your cells faster, because as we age, it slows down, right? I mean, when you're 18, 20 years old, you would lose your epidermal layer every 28 days. But as time goes by, the speed slows down and it takes much, much longer than that. So the cells don't renew themselves very well. Well, NAD helps with that. NAD also promotes collagen and elastin production. So, which means your skin will be a little bit, have more elasticity, firmness, a little bit better structure. So, and it also strengthens the barrier, right? And skin is the barrier that does protect you. That's the first thing that protects you from the outside environment. So it reverses oxidative stress. It does neutralize its free radicals that we just talked about, which means it decreases your wrinkles and improves texture of your skin. So systemic NAD is pretty useful, right? It makes your skin very resilient and hydrated and so forth. Topicals, because you will see some of them, people claim that, since NAD is so popular that, well, hey, I have NAD, put it on your face, go straight to the source. But we talked about before with mineral, there are no really studies, there's no proof to it, because NAD molecule is pretty big. It doesn't go deep inside. So there's no really benefit. Some companies will claim that the precursors to NAD will help, and they will stick it into their creams and lotions. Again, very, very small evidence. So most molecules are so big that they're not going to go into a cell. So some companies break those molecules and they try to deliver it in the smaller, like smaller pieces, smaller quantities. But it showed that absorption is not great enough to actually have effect on your skin. So if you don't waste your money to buy some products that actually would say NAD or NMN or anything like that. Just one precursor that has been shown to be helpful in your skin routine, in your skincare, is niacinamide. So niacinamide, actually on niacinamide, there are there's quite a bit of research. And so niacinamide is just a topical form of vitamin B3. And that one we've been using in dermatology for a while now. And depending on the concentration, it actually serves different purposes. One of the most concentrated formulas of niacinamide you can find, like 10%, usually it's mixed with zinc. It will help with some like oil control and will reduce inflammation. If we go with a little bit lower concentration, like 5%, it will help with anti-aging properties and helps with the pigment. And the lower concentration, like 2%, just enhances the barrier of your skin. So it's also very well tolerated, not like vitamin C or tretinoin. So yes to the systemic NAD, no to the topical NAD, but niacinamide is the go. And I agree with Nal. So I think the Disco also, they have I do believe they have niacinamide, and I love the Visco product. I think it's really, really good and it works fantastic.
Wow. Thank you for breaking that down for those of us who had no clue. Thank you. That was amazing.
My pleasure.
Meanwhile, what things can you incorporate in your skincare routine to look better this week? Inquiring minds want to know.
This is a great question because if you notice any skin product marketing, they'll always say better in 7 days or 10 days, So I feel like this bar has been set to really improve skin quality in 1 week through products, but I think that rarely happens, especially over-the-counter products that we see. But there are a few things that you definitely can make a significant and a noticeable change within a week. And before we get into that, I wanted to just kind of mention, like I said, the skin is a two-part organ. So there's an epidermis, which is, the surface that we can like see and feel. And then there's the dermis, which if you've ever injured your skin, you sort of see that white substance before it starts to bleed profusely. That's the dermis. And the thickness of the dermis, as we said earlier, was different between men and women. And so, the things that we can do topically most of the time affect the top layer of the skin, which is the epidermis. So one of the biggest things that people lack as we get older, and we were talking a little bit about hydration. So I would say the one takeaway, a high yield pro from this session, if you listen to nothing else, when you wash your face in the morning with any cleanser, it really doesn't matter. The cleansers are not on the skin long enough than 20 seconds to make a difference. If you wash your face with a cleanser, and then use a hyaluronic acid serum, which is hopefully a hydrolyzed hyaluronic acid. So meaning hyaluronic acid chopped up into small pieces so it can actually stay on the skin, absorb the moisture. So you're patting your skin dry, not scrubbing the water off, leaving a little bit of moisture using a HA serum. And before that completely dries, using a glycerin-based moisturizer. And one of the ones that I love is La Roche-Posay, the triple barrier repair, which is non-clogging and yet, safe and effective enough for the face and the whole body. Comes in a pump, super easy to use. And then notice the whole day how your skin looks. I mean, it will have that inside, glow that you see with, the glass skin or all the Korean products that are trying to market. I mean, if you do that consistently for several days, it'll make a dramatic difference, especially because we need to focus on hydration because we're all in like forced air environment, air conditioning, heat, all of this is forced air, and that evaporates a lot of the moisture out of our skin. So using something like HA to hold on to the water and glycerin to lock that in will reduce the transepidermal water loss, which is the way the epidermis loses water, making it look listless and not the beautiful, youthful skin that we all really want. So, and of course, the sunscreen after that. So I'll stop there. So I would love for people to try it and see what they think.
Well, I know I'm trying that right off the bat. Those are some great tips that we can do to see these results. I know I've saw a lot of infomercials from some celebrities, and you're like, yes, they look amazing. I want to try that. That's got to work, right? And what you're saying is, yeah, we know that a lot of it can be, who knows, right? So these are things that you can do today. That's great. Thank you. Um, So I think that we are going to, there's so much that we can still cover. Like we have so many things, and we're going to go into answering your questions here, but just know that we're going to continue to give tips and tricks, and the doctors are going to uh, continue to bring in some name brands of some items that we can use just like skincare stuff, or like they have already mentioned, or sunscreen. So we're going to go into some of these questions from you guys out there. Um, so first question is clean mineral sunscreen brands that you guys would recommend. Victoria, if you want to
Yeah,
mention that.
yeah, if you don't mind. So the mineral sunscreens, yeah, I like that people. Well, sunscreen is good, but of course, there's a lot of fear out there about the regular sunscreen, and the main concern is oxybenzone. So, and it can cause some endocrine disruption. So, the spray sunscreens, I'm not the biggest fan because about 35% of it will be contaminated with benzene, so which is carcinogen, and so causes irritation and so forth. Mineral sunscreen is safe, right? So mineral sunscreen a lot of times will so it will have two active ingredients. It will be zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. Zinc oxide gives you better, broader protection for UVA and UVB. Titanium dioxide is more better for UVB. So I probably would stick with the one that has zinc oxide. So you can see what you're using. And the good thing about mineral sunscreen, besides that it doesn't really irritate your skin, it gives you almost like a physical protection. When you put it on, it kind of reflects the sun, and it acts immediate. Of course, it's better if you put it a few minutes before you go outside, but the beauty of mineral sunscreen, it actually gives you almost immediate protection. Um, so tinted mineral sunscreens even better because they also give you protection from the blue rays, and we're all exposed to computers, phones, iPads, right, all day long. So that's something we have to think about. So about sunscreens, when you choose your sunscreen, mineral sunscreen, SPF between 30 and 50. You don't go above 50 because it's more like a false advertisement. You really don't get much more protection, but don't go below 30. A lot of cosmetic products will have, they'll say, 15 or 20, not good enough. Okay, so it should be between 30 and 50. Don't buy sunscreens that have scent to it, so it shouldn't have fragrance. I mean, try to avoid it at least. And of course, people who don't like sunscreens, there are alternatives like hats, long sleeves, and so forth. And another thing about sunscreen, even the best sunscreen is not going to last forever. Okay, so there was a big study done a few years ago where it showed that most sunscreens last only 90 to 120 minutes. So an hour and a half, 2 hours, you have to reapply it afterwards. I hear it every day from my patients. Well, I put my sunscreen on this morning. Well, it's 3 p.m. right now, so it's not going to help you so much. So you have to reapply it every couple of hours. There's several brands. I'll probably has your own, the ones that you like the most. I love Color Science. I think they have fantastic mineral sunscreen. I like CeraVe. I like Cetaphil. I like Elta MD. I think they're pretty good, decent products that give you, they actually deliver what they promise.
Yeah, thank you. I know I stand at that, in the store just wondering which one is the right one. And so yeah, thank you for that. Meenal, could you help us with this next question? How important is it for us to understand our lifestyle, health, diet, all that goes into the path of a healthier looking skin?
I mean, personally, I think it's really, really valuable. Temporarily I will wear like a glucose monitor just to understand what in my diet is really spiking my sugar, because that kind of data can be very powerful in behavior change. Because I think a lot of us really aspire to change lifestyle, but it's, let's be honest, very, very challenging to do. So when you say how important, I mean, that's such a preventable thing. We are seeing evidence that with the way modern medicine's changing, right? We are very likely to live till 100 or beyond. So things that we can do for prevention, not just skin, dental health, bone health, reducing visceral fat, and GLPs are really helpful for that. But just, exercise, sleep, lack of sleep significantly increases visceral fat, which creates insulin resistance, which creates glycation and your skin, issues that are slowly building up. So all of these things are so interrelated, and we're uncovering more and more how interrelated they really are. Kind of figuring out, this month I'm going to focus on my sugar. Next month I'm going to focus on my sleep and developing better habits. I think that, kind of creating some sort of a framework around lifestyle and true modifications, I think is so critical. And yeah, happy to help with that, for anybody who's struggling with it.
Wow. Yeah, you really can tell how I feel like when you look at somebody, you can tell how much work they're putting into their health and their lifestyle. So it really does show all the way around what how good you're taking care of yourself, what you're eating and whatnot. So yeah, thank you for those tips on there. All right, Victoria, can you answer this question? Can fasting help with skin health?
Oh, I think so. I'm a huge, huge fan of intermittent fasting. So, and it goes back to, your hemoglobin A1C. So hemoglobin A1C shows what your glucose level would be in the last 3 months, right? And there's again more studies. There are some studies that show that you decrease your hemoglobin A1C, you go from being diabetic or pre-diabetic, you become healthy, but it does improve your skin. So it's that cascade that Minal was talking about. So you decrease your visceral fat, you decrease your glucose level, you decrease glycation level, and what we mentioned previously, if you can do it just for 4 months, you're already in will see improvement in your skin, like 25% of the collagen you actually almost lost. Now you're reversing, you're bringing it back. I think it's a really big, impressive number. And they've done some studies actually showing how glycation will change it. They've done biopsy of the skin before and then 6 weeks later and then 3 months later, and it showed, and then analyzed it under the microscope, and it showed there's more collagen production actually if you decrease the collagen level. So yes, my short answer is yes. Intermittent fasting, I think, is a good thing. So
Wow, I have learned so much. This has been so informative for me. I hope this has been so helpful for you out there watching. We do all this stuff at VO. You are, all of our members have access to our experts, and you can as well if you decide that VO is a good fit for you. You can always, if you're not a member, you can go to vo.health and book a consultation, call, or chat with our VO AI assistant too for some quick answers. And thank you so much for being here. It's been wonderful to be here with you, Dr. Kettlepal and Dr. Yatsunenko. Thank you so much for all your insights. It's been great, and we hope to see you again soon.
well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again.